on to our second session, I would like to introduce Mr. S Venkat, an accomplished entrepreneur and thought leader with a rich career spanning PwC, Aon, and 2 decades at practice. With a passion for enhancing enterprise value, he masterfully blends strategy, technology, and people to deliver measurable results and business outcomes. A trusted advisor to founders and investors, he thrives in driving transformation, institutionalization, and stakeholder alignment in dynamic environments. Beyond business, Mr. Venkat is a devoted mentor, a student of Indian culture, and a chess enthusiast. Please, would love to welcome you on stage, Mr. Venkat.
Good morning, all. Am I audible? Right, perfect. Thank you so much, Team Capita, for having me here. Like in the case of Lewis, it's still a mystery to me as to why Jalaj extended this invitation, because we've had an opportunity of working very closely with Jalaj and his team with Capita. I still call it ESOP Direct on multiple clients, and he knows very well that one of the reasons that I reach out to him is that I don't know much about ESOPs. So I'm sure we'll kind of figure out the reason as we go along. I want to start by thanking Lewis for 3 reasons. One, to start with the entire concept of trusteeship, right? To start by giving away. And we may not be Bill Gates or who, right? Maybe not Azim Premji, but in our own ways, if we can actually give away 50% of what we have, I think it's a great start, right? So, when we talk about wealth creation and retention, I think you started the day by giving a very different perspective of distribution in a very different sense. So thank you for setting the context, Louis. The second reason is a very selfish reason. It's I felt like we were Rohit Sharma and Yashasvi Jaiswal. Louis obviously being the more senior guy, Rohit Sharma. And it's always good to have him face the first over on a pacey Adelaide pitch with Pat Cummins coming in. And I was happy to kind of sit there like Yashasvi at the non-striker end, just kind of gauging what is the pace and the bounce and the seam of the pitch. Once again, thank you for kind of setting the tone. Just makes my job a little bit easier. The third reason, which I'm sure Louis didn't know till today morning, is that when we started practice, IDFC Private Equity was probably among our first 10 clients. We crossed the 1,000 client mark last year, and I'm deeply grateful to IDFC PE and others who kind of trusted us at a time when we're just getting started off on our entrepreneurial journey. So thank you once again, Louis. I think great job done, Team Capita. A very inspiring journey. Congratulations to Lakshman, Vamshi, Ravi. We need more of your breed. I think people of Indian origin are really next to none in the world today. And what we really need, the need of the hour, is for organizations to go out and become truly global. And I think you have picked a very, very interesting niche. I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more of you, not just here, but in global markets. Wish you the very best for your US foray. Having worked with you and your team, I've got absolutely no doubt that you're going to be a very, very successful scaled-up venture in the times to come. So wish you all the very best. Yeah. Good. So what are we going to do here today? I'm a slightly restless kind of a guy, okay? So I kind of move around in the stage. I hope it doesn't disturb you guys, but I feel a little bit more comfortable this way. I thought we will kind of talk about 3 things, right? So I want to kind of make this session a little bit useful to you. Happy to take questions. If you have any thoughts, any questions, feedback, please raise your hands. Anything technical with valuations, ESOPs, etc., I'm going to direct it to the Capita team. The rest of it, I'm happy to take it. I want to talk a little bit about whether culture is a competitive advantage in business, and what is the correlation between having a great culture and driving great enterprise valuation. So I think the hypothesis is yes, but how do you measure it? Is there a way to measure it? Is what I would like to kind of dwell upon a little bit. The second thing I want to talk about is learnings from some of our clients, right? I mean, a lot of times when consultants like me are called in, we are called in for thought leadership, but believe me, we are all students for life, right? I mean, we are learning a lot from the clients that we're working with as well. And I think we learn more from the failures, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what our learnings have been from both successful and failed journeys with clients, and also some of the successes and failures at practice itself, right? So this is the second component of what I would like to present today. And thirdly, I would like to leave behind some how-tos, right? I think everybody here is a seasoned practitioner. Most of you are head of HR, head of compensation, CFOs, a few founders, maybe a few investors. So whether it's important to build a great culture or not, I think is a given. I think everybody understands why that's important. But the question is, how do you actually translate it into action on the ground, right? So those are the three aspects that I'd like to cover it. I'll try and wrap this up in about 15, 20 minutes, right? And leave some time for Q&A if possible. Right, so let's go on to do I point it in a certain direction? Yeah, okay, perfect. This kind of. Okay, so I'm sure you would have seen multiple studies of this nature. 9 out of 10 CEOs and CFOs believe that improving corporate culture would increase their company's value. 80% of CEOs and CFOs rank culture among the 5 most important factors driving their company's valuation. So I think there's adequate realization here on the table. What to me was really interesting is that companies that were listed among the best place to work, and I'm sure there are a few companies here who have been rated as a great place to work, etc., based on their corporate culture, delivered nearly 20% higher returns to shareholders than comparable companies over a 5-year period, right? Like Louis, I'm also a chartered accountant, and it kind of fascinates me, right? I mean, when I qualified, the big thing was how do you value intangibles, right? At that time, we were kind of learning about how to value goodwill, etc. But it always fascinates me to kind of think about how to value culture. Is there a way to kind of value culture at all, right? And my own conclusion is it's not possible to value culture, but it is possible to value the outcomes that culture can drive, right? Which is what we are going to see in the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about where I'm coming from and possibly why Jalaj invited me here today. So for 15 years, I was with PwC. So, what a typical consultant audit hat. For 6 years, I was a CFO, where I was a recipient of an ESOP scheme. For about 16, 17 years, I've been running my own company where we run an ESOP scheme. So I had an opportunity of being a founder where I'm thinking about how I want to share wealth with some of the leadership that is working with me. I sit on the boards of a few companies where we are kind of thinking through as a part of the nomination and remuneration committee as to how to kind of think about ESOP schemes, and also advise entrepreneurs or founders of family-run businesses. This is more about helping them think through how they want to distribute their wealth and how they want to retain employees, right? So it kind of, I think the last 15 years, I feel deeply grateful that I've had an opportunity of getting this cross-section of perspectives, which hopefully I'll be able to kind of share with you as we go along. Yeah, so this is what we do. So what does Practice do? We are on a mission to kind of creating a global consulting organization. Our mission is to create a McKinsey equivalent, but in the implementation space. So we believe there's a lot of consulting and advisory, but there's very little of actual implementation. That is the how, is where we feel boards, investors, CXOs struggle. So we want to work with managements to drive tangible, measurable value. So our mantra is 3x to 12x. So whatever fees we take, can we actually put back an ROI of 3x to 12x back into the client's pocket, right? So this is implementation-based consulting, not advisory-based consulting. We don't want to give you a PPT and go away. We want to stay with you till the time the money is actually realized in your bank account, right? So it's been a 16-year journey. We got funded about 8-9 years back by an Indian family office. Till date, as I mentioned, we have served about 1,000 clients. We have supported about more than 100 private equity funds. We got about 250 people in 3 markets. This is in the US. We are based in Atlanta, in Middle East, in Dubai, and in India, we got 5 or 6 offices. We delivered a cumulative, we measure ROI that has been delivered to clients. And so far, we have delivered about 500 million in measurable outcomes to clients. And to us, the biggest impact or the biggest value that we have got by building a good culture is the people NPS score. And we have been doing this now for the last 8 years. We measure our people NPS scores on a quarterly basis. It's 43, and our client NPS is currently at 52. Right, so I think 2 fundamental questions that all of us need to answer, which is what I guess this conference is all about, is A, how do you create wealth? And second, how do you distribute wealth? And some ways, I think the answer to the second question is the choice of how you want to distribute wealth could well determine how much and how quickly wealth can be created in the first place, right? So I think as leaders, this is our primary job, right? We've got to figure out wealth, and we've got to figure out how to distribute the wealth, but do it in such a way that interests are aligned, so that we're able to create value faster and at a scale that might not be possible if that alignment were not in place. So what we did is to actually carry out this study, and this is actually work in progress. I got to kind of confess that this is still not complete, but nevertheless, I think it's relevant to share here, which is why I'm going to go out and do it. So this is a study that Practice did of companies that listed on NSE, both main board and small exchange, in financial year 22-23 and 23-24, right? So we kind of looked at listings over a 2-year period. And in this, we listed companies that had a revenue of over 100 crores, right? So we said, let's look at companies that have got some kind of a scale. I think there were about 150 odd companies that got shortlisted. And what we learned is that there is a cumulative enterprise value addition of about 8 lakh crores that was unlocked in the last 2 years. I have actually taken out certain types of companies, like for example, where government is a primary shareholder, we took out those companies, right? So we're looking at privately held businesses, and this could be either private equity, majority owned, it could be family run businesses, it could be new age companies, et cetera, et cetera. But basically we excluded government. Now, if you look at this 8 lakh crore, we analyzed and found that about 3 lakh crore was generated by non-founders. Right, and about 5 lakh crore was generated by founders, right? So about a 2/3, 1/3 kind of a split. So what is sitting in the non-founders bucket is basically 2 types of players, right? It is your financial investors, which is largely your PE, VC, and the second biggest category in this is the ESOP pools, right? So that is kind of sitting as a part of the 3 lakh crore. Now, out of the 5 lakh crore, we found that the value that has been held by the founders after the IPO is about 97%. And they realized through an offer for sale only 3%. So what this means is owners, and those of you who are founders or promoters in the audience today, you have continued to stay heavily invested in the company even after taking the company to an IPO, right? So largely the money that has been made by non-promoters, and there has been primary, which means that money has come inside the company, but founders themselves have chosen not to take too much money off the table, right? So on an average, founders took about 24 years to take a company to an IPO. They generated about 3,000 crores of value for themselves on an average, and post-IPO, their stakes, which was 82% earlier, kind of came down to 63%, right? So and the reason the incomplete part of our analysis is of this non-founders, 37%, how much is actually held by ESOP pools, right? And our estimate at this point, and this is purely an estimate, is that about 15% of this 3 lakh crore is actually held by employees, right? Which is about 45,000 crores, right? Which is significant, right? And let's not forget, this is listings that have happened only in the last 2 years, right? I mean, if you look at it on a cumulative basis, it could be far, far higher, right? I think Ravi's number was about $16 billion is a total value, but that will include the founders' value also, I would presume, right? Or just the non-founders? Okay, that's significant. Okay. Got it. 10 times, got it. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully we'll kind of complete this study soon, and I will share it with you if it's helpful, Ravi, if you would like to circulate it, etc. Right? Right now, I'm going to move to the second aspect, which is what has been our learnings from clients, right? And I've deliberately got a bunch of names from different industries. Some of them are B2B, some of them are B2C, some of them are more well-known, some of them are less known. Unilever, I'm sure all of you have heard of. Rosary is a specialty chemicals company. Unicommerce was acquired by Snapdeal. They kind of provide the subscription-based platform for several e-commerce players. Windlass is the first Indian CDMO company in the pharma space to get listed. Sami Hotels, very, very interesting play in the real estate space. And Keba is a 100-year-old company in the specialty fragrances business. Now, the reason why I put all these names in here is that we had an opportunity of working with all these companies, among several others. But we thought that some of these companies have actually had some very good people practices, especially when it comes to thinking through the ESOP schemes. I'm going to pick up one or two as an example, just to kind of drive home the point, right? So Sunil Chari, who is the founder, one of the 2 partners at Rosary Chemicals, I probably met him about 12, 13 years back, when the company's turnover was less than 100 crores. right? This company saw 65 times growth in its enterprise valuation in about 10 years' time, right? And we have been very fortunate to be a part of his growth story. A lovely guy, and some of the principles that kind of come through when you work with these companies is they're very clear about the 3 C's, right? One is consistency, second is clarity, and third is the credibility, right? Are these founders, if you look at say Keva, somebody like Kedar Vaze, who is the 3rd generation founder there, again, this company kind of saw about a 12 times increase in 6 years' time. Windless, where I sit on the board of, we just crossed the 1,000 crore valuation very recently over here. But in all these 3 cases, we found a common strand, right? Which is that the founders or the people who took the decision on how to structure the ESOP scheme were extremely clear about what they wanted to achieve, right? And these are typical questions that we all grapple with, right? Today, an ESOP scheme, is it a reward for past performance or for future potential? Is it a reward for loyalty or is it a reward for promise, right? Now, I think having a clarity of mind and an authenticity of purpose to say that, look, my intention here could be to retain these people, but I have a genuine urge, a genuine passion to make people a partner in my monetization journey. I think it's a very, very important fundamental must-have as we start this process, right? So the clarity of purpose as to why you want to kind of keep the ESOP scheme, why do you want to define the ESOP scheme and launch it, is the number one thing. Second is the credibility, right? None of these people, in my view, kind of got the ESOP scheme perfect on day one, right? I mean, all of them have made mistakes. They've had to go back to the drawing board. They have had to make changes. They have had to communicate. In many, many cases, we found that the internal valuations, and in case of listed companies, the market prices movements went so adverse that the founders started having doubts as to whether this ESOP scheme should have even been launched or not, right? But the great thing about all these people is that they had the conviction in what they were launching. And they were very open in their communications with the staff, right? There are a lot of times, so business is never linear, right? I mean, it's very exciting to read in the newspapers about unicorns and how people are kind of doing up rounds at even higher valuations, higher and higher valuations. But there are also down times. And when things go south, I think it's extremely important for people in charge. It could be founders, it could be the head of HR, maybe the CHRO, CFO, to be there out on the front foot and communicate what is going on, right? So I think a lot of times we think of ESOP schemes as something that we launch and there's a lot of fanfare around it, but the ongoing maintenance and communication, I think, is an extremely important aspect, because once you lose the credibility, then no matter what you do with the scheme, it ceases to have the impact that it's supposed to have, right? So I think constant communication, maintaining that transparency, maintaining your credibility, I think is a critical aspect of running a successful ESOP scheme. And the third thing is the consistency, right? Because there is an urge, right? There will always be somebody who will say, look, I need more. Can you make an exception? Very, very important to be consistent. Because once you start making exceptions, it becomes very, very difficult to manage the scheme on a fair basis. Yeah? So some of these companies actually have got like quarterly or half-yearly catch-ups with their teams to all the ESOP holders, just to kind of talk to them about what's going on with the valuation of the company, etc. Right? So consider some of these as possible good practices. I also wanted to leave behind, this is part of the how to, in case some of you are interested in further reading, some more ideas on what you can go back and implement. So look at the case study on C&S Wholesale Groceries. It's titled Self-Management Team. So this is an HBR article that's available. You can actually buy it off their site, etc. And there's also a very good article on relational contracts and organizational capabilities by Gibbons and Henderson, right? For those of you who want to kind of delve a little bit more into the practical or the theoretical aspects of why these schemes work, this could be recommended reading. Right. I want to come to a little bit about the way we thought about culture at practice, right? And what have been our learnings, right? So last 15, 16 years, I got to say this, that, me and CHROs have never really gelled well, okay? So at both the companies where I was CFO, I didn't unfortunately get along with the CHRO. And after we started practice, we would have probably run through at least 5 or 6 HR professionals. I realized in retrospect that, obviously the issue is at my end as a founder. I think I could have done something better over there. Obviously, we made mistakes. We learned stuff along the way. My co-founder Deepak Narayan, who is now the CEO of Practice, always tells me, Venkat, tera aur HR ka 36 ka aakda hai, right? We just can't fit in with each other, right? But I do believe that, while we have stumbled, and I don't think we are at that nirvana state yet, there's still a long way to go. We have learned a few things from our mistakes, right? So firstly, we don't use the word employee in our company, we use the word team member. It's a very non-hierarchical structure. We as founders or senior management do not have any special privileges as compared to anybody else, right? So sometimes it's important to kind of set the tone at the top, the culture at the top. Second, we want to hire for practice and not for a role, right? It doesn't matter to us whether somebody is joining in the business development team or somebody is joining in the delivery team or in HR or finance. We want to hire that individual for the company, right? The role is irrelevant. And that's what I learned at Unilever. I think Lakshman here is ex-Unilever. And just to maybe a slight digression, but just to kind of drive home the point, when I was growing up, I was in college, Italy had a very good football team, right? And they had a concept called total football, which meant that a defender could kind of be a midfielder could be a forward could kind of fall back and be a defender. So the team had about 15 people who could play any role, probably except for goalkeeping, which is maybe a very specialized kind of a skill. And I actually saw that in action at Unilever. I was the auditor for Unilever, and I had gone to their tea plant. They had a tea plant very close to Hyderabad called Ghatkesar. So I went to the tea plant, and I don't know this guy. He's a young chap, maybe 3-4 years older to me. I must have been 23, maybe he was 27, 28. And we were having a chat. The audit got done, and I was asking him, how long have you spent at this plant? And he told me I spent 7 days. And I was blown. I said, look, in 7 days, how did you look as if you have been here for 3 years. And that's what Unilever culture is all about, right? I mean, you could be in a plantation one day. The second day, you could be sent to Delhi branch managing sales. Maybe you're kind of talking to some distributors or retailers. Some other day, you're managing a soaps factory. Fourth day, you're kind of buying oils in the head office. Fifth day, you could be managing treasury, right? So how does an organization actually go about building a culture that enables total football, where people can take any kind of a role? So for me, that experience stuck with me, and that learning stuck with me. And we said, look, can we build a team where people can play any role depending on what the organization wants them to do? So we are a performance-first organization. So it's always company above everything else. We have a balanced scorecard approach that we kind of have rolled out to practically about 80% of the team members. Every individual in the company has got a personal development plan, and we have got a quarterly mutual feedback system, which is not just about, we don't call it performance appraisal. We review what they have done, but more importantly, we hear back from them on what they believe the company can do better, right? So these are things where, when you start off the company, and this is a very founder perspective, you think you know it all, right? I mean, you think that, okay, you are the best finance guy, the best HR guy, best salesperson, whatever. But I think the more and more you listen to your people, you kind of realize there is so much value in having this two-way communication, right? So incidentally, we have had to pivot our business model. So our journey has not been smooth. We were India's largest CFO services firm, and still people know us, just like how a lot of people say ESOP Direct instead of Capita. People say my CFO instead of Practice, because that was our history, right? Where people have always known us as a CFO services organization. So for us to have pivoted our model, we have been able to do it primarily because the team was kind of mentally geared to doing things very differently, doing different things, and doing the same things very differently from what we were doing, say, about 2 years back. Right, so we are a great place to work, certified for 3 years running. This year, we also made it to the best workplaces in professional services. Deepak is in the top 25 CEOs of great people managers. So to me, these are the outcome of having built the right culture at Practice. I want to kind of conclude by sharing, I think, 3 takeaways, if you like. I think any kind of a culture improvement starts with us as leaders, right? And I think it's very important for us to take personal accountability or ownership for the change, right? I mean, a lot of us inherit poor cultures or suboptimal cultures. A lot of times we go into clients where culture is almost toxic, right? You've got to inherit it and then figure out how to kind of move it into a zone of positivity. it always starts with you, right? If we don't demonstrate the right leadership behaviors, there's no chance that the team is going to follow. How do we discover our sweet spot is, what do I do well? Which are your personal strengths? What do I truly care about? How do I deliver value to others? And finally, what's my passion? How do I create value for my organization? So that kind of gives you your sweet spot, your why, right? And I think while I think a lot of us are not necessarily conscious about it all the time as to what is our why, even for those of us who are conscious about it, I think it's periodically important to revisit it, maybe once in 6 months, once in a year, to kind of go back and say, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? One of the things about, the thing I was thinking when Louis was talking here is that, they don't make people like him anymore, right? He was talking about how he never saw the IDFC share price or the HDFC share price. I got to tell you, employees today are very, very conscious, okay, about what the valuations are, and they're not happy ever, right? So they could be worth whatever, but they're always looking at which is the next company that can offer them X plus whatever. So I think the passion that we kind of bring to the table, and the reason I'm saying this is because I can also sense a lot of frustration in my own HR, or a lot of sensation with even myself as an entrepreneur, or when I talk to clients, a lot of frustration with the founders there, that no matter how much you do for your teams, it just seems to be inadequate, right? Because it always looks like, it's a bit of a paradox that the first year in which we won the Great Place to Work award was also the year in which we had the highest ever attrition. So how does one even begin to kind of make sense of that, right? But I think it's a paradigm in which we are living in today, right? And the reason I'm saying this is the only thing that kind of sees you through all of this is going to be your passion, okay, for doing what you're doing. And I didn't know about this till yesterday when I was kind of reading up, and maybe it's the origin of the phrase, the passion of Christ. I've always wondered what is the meaning of passion of Christ. Passion, apparently, the Latin root means to suffer, right? So all of us, we think about passion as being something, great, positive. But I think as leaders, when we think about why we're doing what we're doing, one has got the ability to also take the negatives and suffer and bear the pain, because sometimes you may want to do the best thing for your team, but they may not necessarily respond to you the way you want them to respond, right? But I think that's where our conviction as leaders becomes extremely important. Once you've picked a path, stay true to the path. Some people will leave you, but think of the ones who are going to stay on with you. I think those are the ones who can really make an impact to your organization. Right, consistency over intensity. A lot has been said and done about this. We are very close to New Year. It's time for all of us to make our New Year resolutions. And usually it's very intense resolutions, right? And the reason why it kind of tends to peter off by maybe the second week of Feb or first week of March or whatever the date is that we tend to kind of look at things through, or initiatives through the lens of intensity rather than through the lens of consistency. Our learning with our clients and also at practice has been do the right things consistently over a period of time, right? Very boring, extremely boring. It's like someone saying do pranayam for 10 days every day. Very difficult. You will say, okay, let me bunch it up. Sunday, I will do 1 hour. It doesn't work, right? It's very, very important to do small things, but do it consistently. It gives you the outcomes over a period of time. Boring stuff, all of you know this, but do the boring stuff, it gives you the results. Right? And finally, abstraction to action. And this is something I always tell my CHRO, Aditi, and she's now fed up of me because of this, is, we have these values, right? It will say transparency, integrity, teamwork, collaboration, being a family or whatever. I always wonder that I keep telling her, look, if I'm somebody who's a 28 year something, maybe I joined practice from Indore or wherever. What does this even mean to me, right? So how do we move from abstraction to action? And I think all of us who are responsible for building cultures in our company have to think that is our work over by defining those values, or does it go a little bit beyond to kind of making sure that it's happening in practice? So we have gone to some crazy lengths, right? Let me give you an example. Let's look at something like teamwork, where we are saying cross-functional teams have to kind of work together. So we are a small organization, so it's easy, it's only 250 people. We have actually mapped the number of intersection points between different teams, right? So if sales and delivery and HR are working on something, we have said, okay, that's a 3-way intersection point. So can you actually measure the number of intersection points and track that over a period of time? Because then that tells you whether teamwork is actually happening on the ground or not. We also said we will be a good news company. So we said we got to celebrate our successes. We don't do that enough. I think most companies don't do it enough, right? We're always worried about, okay, what is the gap between the actuals and the budgets? We got some catching up to do. In your performance appraisals, you're talking about, you did a good job, but, you got to do these 3 things better. So we said, look, can we actually, 5 minutes to go? Yes. Okay, perfect. I'll wind up. So how can we actually kind of turn into a good news company? So we actually measure the number of good newses that we kind of come out every week, right? So can we kind of move from abstraction to action, right? So we're going to put ourselves in the shoes of our employees and see how they perceive it. Good. I finally want to end on this note, and this could be a bit of a contrarian view where we're talking about financial wealth creation. I think when people, and Simon says that when people are financially invested, they want a return, right? When they're emotionally invested, they want to contribute. The question is, what are we trying to build? It's very, very important, I think, to think through the ESOP issue very consciously, very deliberately, in a lot of detail. I always worry that if financial incentives is the only motivation, is there a risk that we're going to end up with a bunch of mercenaries? What we want is an army that is working for a larger cause, not a bunch of mercenaries who are here to kind of maximize their financial outcomes, right? So something for us to be conscious about as we go along. Again, some suggested readings for those of you who are interested. Good. So I'm going to borrow a leaf out of Lewis, and he talked about his formula of LBW plus. So I came up with my own formula of LBW minus. Okay, and something for us to think about. One, I think love. Love your people. You got to put them above you. I mean, that to me is the fundamental starting point. ESOP, no ESOP, whatever, you got to love your people. You got to love what you're doing. You got to love what you're doing for them, right? Many of us are in a position that even if I love my own wealth, unless I make my team members wealthy, I'll never become wealthy, right? So please love them. It's in your interest to do so. That is L. B is be positive, okay? I think for all of us as leaders, if you're owners, you don't have a choice. I mean, you have to be positive, right? But even otherwise, for those of us who are in a leadership position, be positive about what you're trying to run. Believe in what you're trying to run. Pivot the model, that's fine, but don't compromise with your philosophy of trying to make your employees partners in the growth of your company. The last W is to always start with the why. Okay, keep asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing, and why do you think an employee will want to do what you want him to do? Okay, always keep the why at the center of your universe. So that is my LBW. The minus is minus your ego, right? Always put your team above you, put your company above you. Again, sounds very boring, but very important, I think, to keep reminding ourselves that no matter how successful you are as leaders, as business owners, as board members, a less ego kind of an existence is what is in the best interest of your team, right? So with LBW plus and minus, we'll bring the keynote session to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venkat. Hello. Thank you, Venkat. Just wait. I'll invite Lakshman and Ravi both to come together for felicitating Venkat.